Hey, welcome to High Resolution. My name is Bobby Ghoshal.
And I'm Jared Arandu.
We're sitting down with 25 masters of the design industry. If you've joined us for the last couple of weeks, we certainly have been learning a lot. We hope you've been learning a lot. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to sit down, we're going to talk about how the best companies in the world approach, communicate, and deploy design every single day.
In this episode, we're speaking with Dave Lippman. Dave is the VP of Design at eBay. He'll focus on his years at Apple, where he was the creative director of online retail, how and when to use intuition versus data, and how eBay uses data.
We'll get to the episode after this quick message from our partner, so stick around.
For decades, design has impacted how we live. Now it's beginning to shape how we work. Here at IBM, design thinking has given us a new framework for teaming, for co-creating with our clients and users. It's helping us make decisions faster, and it's keeping humans at the center of everything we do.
Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So first question, what's one thing about design that's clear to you that you don't think is so clear to other people?
Maybe it is clear. I don't know. The thing that jumps into my mind is that there is this tension as a designer between creativity, craft, and being strategic. And that is like this constant tension that I think all designers tend to feel in one shape or form. And when I grew up and went to college and all of those things, like it was all about craft. It was all about craft, and it was all about the craftsmanship of being a quote-unquote designer. And I think that there's been this shift over the years, obviously, where you can't just show up with that one component, with that one skill set. And I think we haven't figured out as an industry which one of those things leads and which one of those things recedes. And I think it probably varies from moment to moment, but I think that's something to me that I constantly see our teams trying to balance, but we don't really talk about it. Or we haven't talked about it a lot in the past, and it's something that just sort of continues to be popping into my head lately, that I'm not sure if it's fully understood by others. How
do you know when a specific one should lead? Because to your point, I mean, there are times where craft should lead. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is what the problem is. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I also think it's well, I guess it's probably the biggest part is what's the problem we're trying to solve, and when are we in the process, and what are the outside factors that are sort of pushing us through these decisions. So I think that's, for me, I think it really does come down to the problem.
Do you bring some visibility, or do you spend a lot of time bringing visibility to the business with the designers that you work with? Like, do you get them involved with the executives, pitching, stuff like that?
Absolutely. It's part of our sort of growth trajectory at eBay is to make sure that the people who are responsible for the decisions of a product design decision are accountable for the things that the decisions they make, and have the opportunity to share the rationale. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen every single day. Like, it's not just a parade of designers walking into the CEO's office and saying, "This is the thing I made, and this is the thing," But we try to spend a lot of time making sure that everybody knows how to articulate and defend their decisions as a designer, and it's good for everybody.
What are some of those exercises like?
How do you mean?
So you spoke about making sure that everyone knows how to articulate and defend.
Yeah. I don't know if we have like a formal training regiment in terms of like what that is. I think the framing that we try to set forward is always need to be set in context so that people understand. And for us, the customer is the context that we're always trying to bring to light. There's lots of forces inside of any successful company. There's the internal forces, there's the business, and then there's the customer. And we sort of fashion ourselves as champions of the customer to make sure that we're always bringing the customer to the foreground. And so it's super important for us to set the context of what their problem is, what their journey is, what the opportunities are around them. And make sure that we have a strong articulation of that before we get into any sort of like presentation of what a solution might be.
So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you spent 3 years at Apple before you came here.
I did.
Before that, you were a partner at your own small design firm.
That's right.
That you left to go to Apple. I find really interesting is the timing of the whole thing. You went to Apple in 2011. While you were there for 3 years, grew into the head of the online retail.
The design, the creative director for
exactly.
Retail experience,
And you joined when Steve was still alive. He wasn't there, but he was certainly a presence.
Yeah.
How did design change, like the approach to design, the way people talked about products during the 3 years since Steve's passing? Yeah,
it's funny, and I think it's sort of highlights the notion that the train never the train never stops, right? Doesn't matter who you are, what you do, and I think that's it was really evident at Apple after Steve died that there was an emotional break for people where it meant a lot, and they questioned about what was going to happen with the company. But everybody just kept making the same thing they kept making. There was not really a change in ethos or philosophy or anything like that. There were some decisions that I think Steve had drawn a line in the sand around the role of e-commerce and marketing that we were able to challenge a little bit more after he wasn't there. But the day-to-day of how Apple operated as a design is sort of a legacy of a strong design culture, and it was sort of built in from day one, I think, or at least from the time I was there. It never really changed that much, which isn't that interesting of a story, but it's actually kind of a testament for the organization. Yeah.
And how did the role of a designer at Apple contrast to designers here at eBay? And this could involve things like process, things they focus on.
I think the day-to-day of what a product designer does at Apple and does at eBay, at least in the groups that I was a part of with e-commerce and some extent in marketing side of things, wasn't terribly different. I think the biggest difference, and sort of what I was going to a little bit before, is that the place, the space that a designer occupied at Apple, it was elevated, right? Like Apple is a design company. If you're a designer at Apple, and if you're a finance person at Apple, design is what is done there. And so, that's not necessarily, that wasn't the case at eBay, and that's not a bad thing. I think 99% of the startups that happened in that era, design wasn't a thing. And so, like most companies, there's a lot more work to be done to bring design to equal footing within the organization.
Yeah. If we just climbed a little bit higher, and so that's the role of designers in the organization. The role of e-commerce, though, right? To eBay, that is the thing.
Well,
versus at Apple, right?
Yeah.
So how, what were the different ways that Apple approached e-commerce versus how you're doing it today?
Well, I think to that very point, and it sort of taught that one point about, at Apple, e-commerce is just a sales channel, and at eBay, it's the channel.
Yeah.
Like, there's just one business that we're in, and it's e-commerce, and it's a dual-sided marketplace, which is incredibly complex. And so, at Apple, because you were just one of many sales channels in e-commerce, you could push the boundaries and not have a massive impact, both in a good and a bad way, on the company, right? Like you could, switch out the website with an image map and probably still sell close to the same amount of things because people will they're luxury items that people really want. And at eBay, but there's a downside to that at Apple as well, because you wind up toiling around the edges and you don't really have that much of an impact in customers' lives.
Sure.
And it's actually probably the biggest thing that pulled me away from Apple to eBay was this opportunity to impact an entire business, and for design to be one of the change agents to help bring about what a new eBay might be. So that to me, that's the the opportunity for impact at eBay, I think for any designer, is the thing that gets a lot of people out of bed. That you're impacting the entire business, not just this little portion of it.
eBay is pretty well known too about using data quite objectively to make decisions.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, was that new when you came here? Is that, because like everything I've heard about how Apple does things is just not that.
Yeah.
So coming here, that must have been some sort of a shock, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that. I mean,
Right.
I think if you were to try to quantify it, Apple is a relatively intuitive organization, sort of collectively intuitive, operating off its own gut, and they do it their way, and they make it work. And eBay, like most other companies, utilizes data, and it's absolutely not a bad thing. It's a great thing. Like, why wouldn't you want to have data?
Of course, yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to have more ammo for understanding your customers or understanding opportunities and problems, especially as a designer? So it was a shock to the system, but a very exciting shock to the system for me, like something that I felt was absolutely missing in previous experiences at Apple, was the idea that the customer would actually be here and we could actually learn.
So what I find interesting, this intuitive driven culture at Apple versus a data driven culture here at eBay, going from one to one, were there any elements of Apple that you brought over?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think can be the downside of relying on either one of those things completely is that you are unable to make a decision when the thing isn't there. So at eBay, if you're making a new product or a new experience, and if there is no data, how do you actually know if you're making the right thing? And if you only just rely on data to make judgments, that other part of you atrophies, right? That other part of your ability to make decisions atrophies, and that's one of the things I observed when I got here. And it wasn't terrible in that sense, but what I saw was a lot of folks who would just say, "Oh, let's just see what the data says," and saying that about everything, as opposed to saying it about the things where it truly made an impact. And so. We spent a decent amount of time my first year here trying to help rationalize when it was an intuition kind of call versus a data kind of call, and I think that teams appreciate that, and it's something that I think as a designer you're always trying to balance those two things, and I think even as a product folk or engineering folks they would agree that like having some way to balance those things would be really good.
So that balance is key. What were some of the signals that you guys identified to decide between intuition versus data?
I think one is understanding what data is available, and when it's available is an important part, and the kind of data, right? Yeah. So if you have all quantitative data and no qualitative data, you understand what happened, but you don't understand why. And if you only have qualitative data, you'll understand why, but you don't know what happened, right? It's hard because you don't have the amount of data that you need. So one is just understanding the data, understanding its relevance to the decision that's being made. And then, I think on the other side of it is, when you get to that other side of your intuition, one of the sort of goofy questions that we would sort of make sure we asked ourselves was, do I love this thing? Like, would I want to use this? Like, do I care about this thing? Do I even care about this feature? Do I think it's a good idea? And if not, like, what am I doing? What data am I doing? What data am I finding to help me make find an articulation of why I feel this way about this? So that was, we had a set of operational principles for the design group, and one of them was, I love this thing. And it was this sort of like checklist of things as a designer working on our teams that, do you love it? And if you do, great. And if you don't, like, maybe you should keep working on it, keep iterating.
It's interesting. It's like data doesn't have taste.
No, I haven't seen, maybe it does, I don't know. Maybe we don't have taste and data has taste, but who knows? Yeah.
I'd like to go back to the moment where you decided to come to eBay. That was a big decision, right? You're leading a design
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think leaving a job is a life decision.
Yes,
right?
Totally. Of course it is. Yeah.
And you're leaving a design-led company with a history of design into a company where eBay needed you to bring your design sensibilities to work with the executive levels.
Yeah.
And really help bring eBay into the design-led company list, right? So that's a big decision.
Yeah.
So were you nervous when you first approached that opportunity? Did you think, wow, this is kind of a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a bunch of parts to it. I mean, I think you sort of articulated both the part that would make you totally nervous and skeptical of it, but it also illustrates the opportunity.
That's right.
It's the challenge and the opportunity are usually connected to each other. Right?
Of course.
There's no
Double-sided coin.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so, and on a daily basis during that decision-making process, I would either err on one side or the other. I would just keep flipping it and see which one I ended up. But I think that, and this sort of goes back to something I was saying before about one, the opportunity to impact the entire company through design was a huge plus. It was at a scale that I haven't been at before, going from leading a team of 15 or so people to a much larger team, and around 100 or so. Big change.
They call that an order of magnitude difference.
That is an order of magnitude. And I think the other thing for me, I think there was some cultural parts that I continued to weigh around transparency within the organization, decision making within the organization, and then just that opportunity to help transform a company, right? I tend to, in most of my life, have found myself gravitating towards the underdog, and Apple was a little bit of an anomaly in that sense. And I think eBay is not the underdog by any stretch, but I think it's a very, very successful business. But the opportunity to help transform it and become a design, a player on that list of design-led companies was huge. And so, I think the last bit that flipped the decision for me was around the company's purpose. Apple makes incredible products, and that's really cool to be around. But I think the thing about eBay, in terms of just what its impact on the world is, it's a two-sided marketplace that if you have an entrepreneurial bone in your body, you can sell things, you can find financial freedom.
Yeah.
And that's an incredibly empowering thing to wake up and think about every day. And so for me, that was kind of the biggest thing, I think, at the end of the day. And then the last bit is, as a designer, designing a two-sided marketplace is way more interesting and way more complex than a traditional retail site. So many more problems to solve. Yeah.
So there are people listening to this right now who probably have, they probably have a very similar decision to make, right? They have career opportunities and they need to make a big decision about whether they should pursue something new or kind of stick in the role that they're in now. On the one hand, you have to be patient, right? So I'm curious as to how much patience plays into that decision-making process without being overly reactive or just jumping at the next shiny object.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm necessarily, if you would classify me as a patient person, so I don't know how qualified I am to answer that. Well, I think it's, everybody's balancing act is complacency versus, just anxiousness to go do something else, right? How do you know if you're being complacent or if you're just happy? Versus your restlessness is actually a sign that you should go, or you're maybe not thinking about it right, or you're not. And so I think that those two things, in life, we're all sort of fighting that fight on a daily basis, and I don't know if people's careers are any different than that. And I guess the thing that I would say is do you like the people that you're around? Are you learning? Are you making things that you love? Do you believe in the place? Do you believe in the company? And how do you balance that against the opportunity? Like, I don't know, you know, maybe you just need to make a checklist and objectively put them down the two columns. But I tend to gravitate towards those other things, sort of like in life. Like, are you getting what you need out of it, right? And is your impact measurable, if that's something that matters to you?
I wonder if seniority plays a role in this, though, because that kind of change doesn't happen overnight, right? So you didn't come to eBay and magically design became a thing. Like, you've been working hard at it with the executives here, and we'll get into that. But you know, these things tend to play out in chapters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You kind of first need to start establishing some principles and groundwork and a framework for non-designers to understand the role of design, and then you kind of work your way toward hopefully getting the kind of work that would lead to good design, and then you hopefully get to a place where you ship good design, right?
Yeah.
Is there a way to like identify where you are in that? And it's probably not a linear map, but like where you are in, so you've spent 3, 4, 1 year at a place, and you're not happy, but maybe you're not happy because you need to probably stick it out just a little bit longer. A few things need to get kicked in that will kick in. Like, how do you poke at that and like figure that out?
That's a great question. I mean, I think maybe part of it is like, what are you seeing? What are the things that you're seeing that are leading you to believe that you're either being successful or not successful? Because oftentimes, in my experience anyway, especially when you're talking about like change, right? Change is really hard. It means people have to do something differently. And you know, one of the things, like thinking about just my time at eBay, like there have been moments where it feels like nothing's working. And because, you know, I'm getting pushback from people, or but that's just people trying to rationalize something new in their lives, right? And so it's important to, when you're looking at the things that seem like maybe they aren't going well, you know, what is behind that? What's a layer behind that? Like, is that actually a sign of something good? Right? If people are actually rationalizing the change, that means they're trying to understand it, and they're trying to figure out how to use it, or maybe reject it, but they're paying attention at least, right? And I think we all have had experiences where you know, the ultimate sign of failure is like just total apathy, right? Like nobody's even paying attention, and maybe that's a sign, right? Like, maybe if there's just complete like disregard in every possible way for the thing that you're.
If you hate waking up in the morning, right?
Totally. You know, maybe that's a sign that things aren't going the way that you want them to. But again, it's, you know, if you just take a singular data point and try to analyze that data point and don't think about it over time, you can get blinded. Same thing with everything we do.
So we spoke about some of the questions you ask when you're deciding whether to leave. But what are some that someone should be asking themselves when they're deciding where to go?
Well, I think there's a bunch of them. I think the biggest one that I would say, especially as you're getting a little bit, well, no, I think at any point in your career, like, what kinds of problems are you going to be solving, right? Like, that was for me, leaving my design company I was a partner at to go to Apple. I went from solving like pretty basic design problems that I had been solving for a long time to something totally new for me. That's a big deal. And then going from Apple to eBay, I went from this notion of polishing the edges of, you know, a quote unquote diamond, to like helping transform a company. So like, I think thinking a lot about just the kind, even if it's still, you're still making things from job to job, but like, what does the company do? Like, what do they stand for? How many people am I going to impact? How are my decisions going to change people's lives, or not change people's lives? I think so. For me, I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's just like, what kinds of problems do you want to solve? The other one that's important for me, and I suspect for everybody else, is like, who are the people you're going to be surrounded by on a daily basis? Like, do you like them? Would you go out to dinner with them? Like, if you don't want to go out to dinner with them or hang out with them, is that, that's a hard thing to do. So it's my own personal sort of thing, but I think it's a big part of just how you're going to spend your time and who you're going to spend your time with is like, it's sort of the fundamental question of life.
Yeah, it sounds like you need to know where you want to grow, and you need to know what makes you happy. Yeah. Because it's your job to be happy, right? It's kind of your it's on you.
No one's going to do that for you.
Yeah, and I think the other, I learned this a while ago, excuse me, was everything changes. And like, I interviewed for a job a long time ago, and I was in the interview process. I was like a art director or something, and I asked the question of like, where do you see this role being in 2 years, and what do you see success? It's like the quintessential JV, like I'm here to do the interview kind of question.
Buttoned up.
Just like, and the guy just looks at me and he's like, just stay here, because every single thing that we're talking about right now in 6 months is going to be totally different. And so you need to make a decision about like this company and me as your boss and a couple of other things. Yeah. And it's partially about what do you want to learn or what's missing, but it's also just about like truly you're going to spend your time here with these people. And I think that was like sage advice. Yes, and I would absolutely, I believe it 100%. Everything changes, and it changes all the time. And what you go in thinking and what you come out like literally in a couple weeks, probably totally different. All of your assumptions will be wrong, and everything will change.
For decades, design has impacted how we live. Now it's beginning to shape how we work. Here at IBM, design thinking has given us a new framework for teaming, for co-creating with our clients and users. It's helping us make decisions faster, and it's keeping humans at the center of everything we do. Of course, we're inspired by our design program, which is over 60 years old. But today, IBM employs more than 1,300 professional designers, and we've certified more than 60,000 IBMers in the practices of IBM design thinking. The result? Diverse teams working more closely than ever with our clients, their users, and our partners to create modern solutions that provide differentiated, human-centered outcomes to the world. We'd love to share this story more closely with you, and I hope to see you soon at one of our IBM studios worldwide.
We'd also like to thank our friends at InVision for their support. InVision is the world's leading product design platform, powering the future of digital design through their deep understanding of the importance of collaboration. They're used by some of the most innovative companies in the world, like Facebook, Capital One, Airbnb, and Netflix. Let me tell you 3 reasons why I'd use it. 1, poor communication is one of the biggest blockers for talented teams. 2, when you don't get feedback from others early and often, you can get lost in the woods, and that's just bad for everyone. And 3, without a prototype, it can be hard to show others your full vision for a design. InVision solves all of that. You can rapidly prototype at the front end of the design process and collaborate across every stage of the project. It simplifies virtually every aspect of the design workflow and makes collaboration a core part of the process for everyone, from project managers to designers, developers, and writers. Teams that build digital products are at a serious advantage when they use InVision's suite of prototyping and collaboration tools. It's the best way to get everyone on board. Visit InVisionApp.com and use our access code INV-high resolution for 3 months free. So Dave, take us through your first 6 months at eBay, especially the things that you prioritized.
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago. I think it's, a lot of it is something everybody would do, right? Like meet everybody, just get to know every single person that was on the design team. And not just on the design team, but my partners in the business, product marketing, all of that kind of stuff. And truly try to understand like what mattered to them and what the problems were. And when you're at a company as big as eBay, and that takes like 6 months. Like it took a really long time. Even if I just broke them down into 10-minute intervals, like I was meeting with a couple hundred people and trying to actually make sense of any of that.
At what point did you start actually doing the work?
I still haven't started doing the work. Well, I think that's part of it, right? Because I think what we all learn as designers at some point is like you're wrong all the time. Like your assumptions are totally wrong. And you know, when I walked in here and took the job, I had my assumptions as to like, why isn't eBay shipping the products that we all think they should be shipping? Like, is it a problem with design? Is it a problem with product? Is it you know, like all of those kinds of things. And until you actually talk to people and listen to people and try to and spend some time analyzing that, like it's impossible to know, right? Like, so I spent a lot of time doing that. You know, we did actually ship some stuff in that 6 months that I was here. Nice. The other thing that happened that was pretty fascinating was we went through a couple of fire drills around from a technology standpoint that dropped me in with a bunch of people that I had never met before on like, you know, sort of crisis mode, kind of, you know, 5 days in a room together, war room style. And that was the best crash course in understanding this business that I have in any of my experiences. Yeah. Both building the bonds with the people that I now consider, you know, close partners and friends, but also just learning in detail on the fly of like what it means to make decisions here. And that was a really unscripted and important thing. I busted my boss's chops for a couple months after that, asking him if that was just like a hazing. Yeah. Like, is that just what they do to everybody? They just come up with a fire drill. Yeah. Turns out it wasn't. It was just me. You know, it's just sort of, I think, what every designer does whenever you're trying to solve a problem, right? You know, it's like design thinking 101. You're trying to understand, you're trying to make some informed decisions, and then you iterate. Like, I think that was and I know that's pretty abstract, but I think as I was learning the people, learning the pain points, learning what the opportunities were, where we were being successful, what success actually looked like, I think that was kind of the biggest thing. I sort of mentioned this before of like, everybody has their own version of what right is, and spending a lot of time trying to understand that, and then how that mapped back to the company, like what the company saw as right, and trying to find the deltas in there. And so that was a lot of the first 6 months. There was organizational work that had to be done. There was process work that had to be done. One of the, if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff around process, one of the things that we instituted not long after I got here, and it was an interesting maneuver and potentially painful. It was actually very painful for the team here. Was we started instituting design reviews, executive level design reviews for every single project that was going through. Awesome. And if you can imagine an entire product design and tech organization that didn't have to do that beforehand, that now all of a sudden had to go through this gate. Yeah. Your change looks different in for a lot of people, and
I'm curious what the first one actually felt like.
Yeah. What'd you guys do?
Was that hazing for that designer? Like,
right.
It was a pretty fascinating moment. It sort of goes back to, we were talking about the question of, it was actually where we identified the question of, do you love this thing? Yeah. We were sitting in a design review, like second project to come through, and you know, designer's presenting his work, and he's like, worst body language ever, just like crumpled over, like just so bummed out about everything that they were presenting. Yeah. And the product manager sitting there right next to them, engineering leads right next to them, and so it's like the whole team's presenting. And so at some point, I paused and I was like, so do you actually believe in this thing that you're presenting? Like, do you actually like this thing? And he looks over at the product manager, and the product manager's like, I don't know how to respond to you.
Can't answer for
No,
you.
I'm not good. And he's like, and he said no. And I thought that was like a really brave thing to do, and it was like a really powerful thing for me to learn, like a powerful insight to learn about like what was sort of happening underneath. And I think the thing I said to him, like, next time we talk, like, you should show what you love, right? Do the other thing too. Do the thing that somebody else thinks is right, or that that's been roadmapped or prioritized, but also make the thing that you think really does solve the problem or changes the problem. And then let's talk, and we'll see which one we pick. And we'll see which one the data proves out is right or wrong. And we'll probably be right 50% of the time, but at least, we have that. And so it was really hard for the teams to go through that because it just meant this whole new process. But it was really important for myself and for my boss to just understand all of the work that was happening. That was like the first part of it, was just for us to see every single feature product that was getting put out into the world. And so, we created a funnel where, the funnel was hard because it actually slows down execution.
Of course it does.
And it slows down productivity. But it was super helpful because we could learn, and we could also help share out what we thought was important as well as like a design leadership team, and help, not to say that we were right, but just the things that we thought were important, because you can like stand on stage and say that stuff, but it only really comes to life when you're down with somebody making those decisions together.
The funnel helps vest the other people in the decision as well, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a very inclusive, visible, transparent process.
Yeah. So we did that. It was hard. It's really hard for people, but it was valuable. I think most people would say that it was a valuable tool. We have since let that relax a bit because we don't want to be a command and control company. We're absolutely trying to push as many decisions down into the teams as possible. But it was a valuable tool at that moment. Learned a lot from that. Just that one thing.
What's different about, so we got the picture of your first 6 months here and what you prioritized then, and of course you understanding the world of eBay was the most important thing back then. What is it today? What do your days look like? What are you focusing on?
That's a great question. Email. No, I'm just kidding. Keynote. No. I think I would say that I spend a lot of time on alignment. That's probably one of the biggest things. Making sure that people in the design organization understand the context for why our company is doing things, and why we're doing those things, why those things matter, and why they're important to do. And bringing people along, and then on the flip side is helping the executive leadership of the company continue to understand how design can play a big role in continuing to transform the company. So a lot about it is around context. A lot of it is around alignment, and a lot of it is continuing to bring to light the important role that design can play. So even though it's 3 years in, it's
an everyday job.
Job security, man.
Job security, there we go.
Yeah. No, it's super important.
What are the decisions that the design organization, now you're the vice president of design for eBay at large, right? What are the designs that your organization is responsible for?
The decisions that my organization is responsible for. It's interesting. If I tried to pinpoint like the actual decisions that the team is responsible for, I don't know if I could pinpoint that, because I think it varies per team, and I think it varies in the moment. I think people like the pretty obvious answer is like the end-to-end customer experience, and how that all maps together, and how how we actually manage to create great experiences for people. But I think just saying that design owns a decision, I think that's actually a problem. It's hard when ownership is distributed, right? Like when decision making is distributed, it can be very, very hard. But I think if it's design making decisions versus product making decisions versus engineering making decisions versus marketing making decisions, like you get into a turf war. And I think what we try to spend our time focusing on is making sure the team is accountable, and with that comes the decision making, the decisions that go along with that. So if the Scrum team is responsible for a user experience decision, it's not just a designer being like, well, I'm the designer, and so this color red is what I've chosen.
And I feel good about it.
And it is my decision, and so, those days I think are gone. I think there was a moment in time, probably up until about 10 years ago, where design still was mostly rooted in graphic design or product design, where you have like a designer. It's about the designer, right? It's about the designer you hire to make the logo for you, right? Like you hire Paul Rand to make a Paul Rand logo, and there's no questioning that, and it's just him and his way, and that's it. But creating interactive experiences is centered around people. It's not self-centered, it's user-centered, right? And I think we went through this transformation, I think it was like probably 10 or 15 years ago, but we never really reconciled it as what it means for a designer for myself, I went through that transformation without even knowing it. But it is like if you're sitting there just trying to own decisions as a designer, especially in a product design organization, and that's the thing that matters to you, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because you just don't. It's just not the way it works anymore. I don't think anyway. And I think you can own the how you organize your sketch files. That's super cool. Now there's everybody's got their list of things I own that and that. But I think we're all better for it if the team's responsible for the decisions. Yeah.
So when design is communicating its function to executives, right, and to C-levels, what should they be focusing on then? Is it implementation? Is it process, outcomes, money? And this is tying back to the fact that the responsibility of the product is owned between other roles outside of design.
I think it varies. I think it's going to vary from team to team, from company to company, culture to culture. Yeah. I think so. It's hard to just pinpoint exactly what that means across companies. But I would say at eBay, for us, it's about making sure the customer and their context is represented. That's we have to balance the customer need and the opportunity with what the business wants and needs. And so for us, that's a big part about it. And it's, I think you could probably chunk it up to three things, and it's sort of how we look at it, especially within our research organization. What product should we be making? What product should we be making? What is the experience of that product? And then what is the interface of that product? How is it used? And I think if you chunk those things out, that's probably a pretty good way to think about it. And it'll, the presentation and the context will vary depending on why you're talking about it. But I think those are pretty good sort of rubrics to sort of bucket things into. And it's a good way if you can build some vernacular along those lines across teams and across the executive leadership. You can walk into a room and say, okay, we're talking about the interface today. We're talking about the experience today. We're talking about what the product is, conceptually. It can be a valuable way to sort of articulate that. So it's not the things that just design presents. It's what the team presents and what the team is trying to push for.
What would you tell a business leader that's on the fence about investing, like really investing in design? I like the smirk.
I would tell them that it's going to take a long time for the change to happen. And I would tell them that it's going to cost them a lot of money. And I'd tell them that that designers are a pain in the ass.
Yeah, they are.
And that they're going to question everything. And I would tell them that we're going to blow stuff up. And we're gonna take a divot out of your profits. And if they're still excited after I say all those things to them, then I know that like we're actually having a real conversation because they actually truly understand like how important it is. I'm not saying to go do that. Like I don't. That's not like Dave. That's not like Dave's foolproof checklist to like impress upon an executive the value of design. But I think, again, it goes back to sort of managing change, right? Like everything we're talking about is change. And it requires tenacity and it requires fortitude to do it. And if you're just sort of like, I don't know, this design thing sounds like it's cool, maybe it's not right for you. I think it is right for you. Maybe you're just not ready for it yet. You need a better understanding of it. And I think the last part of it is that I would impress upon something, or I would be sort of looking at to see how an executive responds is by investing in design, you're not investing in something else.
Opportunity cost.
And so what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to deprioritize so that design can actually happen here? And a good CEO would say nothing, because that's their job, is to have cake and eat it.
Yep.
But it's, those are important questions to get into, because they're all true. Like, and we can sugarcoat it all we want to say, like, but just wait until you see what you get at the end, which is also a super important part of it. But I think understanding that there are real trade-offs to making something like this happen is a big deal.
So assuming somehow someone talks to the CEO and they drop all those things, designers are a pain in the ass to work with, taking a divot out of your profits, all these things, and somehow they're still in the room, still listening, right? Mm-hmm. And then from there, they give you some free way to bring design to this organization, right? 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, like what should they be looking for to show that this is actually working, right? Progress is happening.
I feel like we talked about it a little bit before of, there's the outcomes, right? Like the outcomes, like great product experience, great X experience with, everything up and to the right is, I think that's what everybody wants, and thinks of design as a silver bullet. And what I think what we were talking about before was like, are people actually engaging it? Is there tension? Is there debate about the efficacy of what we're doing? If that's there, if that's happening, that's like actually a good sign, because people are actually trying to rationalize it. Yeah. I think, a little bit further down the line, when other people outside of design talk about the value of design, you're onto something, right? When people are doing your job for you, that like you're onto it. When you have people in the product organization, and I'm not saying this happens ever, but if you had people in a product organization giving up their headcount for designers, or giving their budget to design, you're onto something. That you're making traction within the company, and those are there's stages to that, right? But I think it's you start to see how people accept things, and then they start to make it their own. And we're having a lot, like at eBay, we're having a lot of success with that right now, where a lot of the things that we've been piloting over the past 6 months are now being adopted by the product organization. And part of the initial response is like, hey, that's our thing. We made that happen. And we're like, no way, man. Like that means that it matters so much to the organization that they're willing to, they want to take ownership of it. And so for me, like, there's no better sign of our success is when the rest of the company starts thinking like designers, starts doing like designers, and starts embracing it and taking ownership of it.
Well, so this leads us to a series of questions that we sourced from our community. So we reached out to a bunch of people in the community and we asked them, you know, what's kind of burning up in their mind at the moment. And we have a few of these, so we're going to go through these with you now.
Let's do this.
Okay, so our first question is, how do you explain the role of design to people at eBay?
I've done it a lot. I think it varies depending on who you're talking to. I think the role of design, as I see it right now, is again, I sort of feel like a broken record, is to like bring the customer to life, understand the opportunity as it relates to the customer, and help actually manifest that experience for them. Yeah. Like, that to me is kind of a really important part of everything that we do. And it's the thing that we have to continue to push on. And you can't do wrong by bringing the customer to life.
Another question we have is, how is the design organization structured at eBay?
Oh, perfectly.
Job well done.
Without like getting in front of a whiteboard and drawing an organizational chart, we are
fingers.
Yes. This is me.
So over here on the left, and then over, so we're organized around two sort of main areas. One is the work that we do, like. We have a brand design team, and we have a core product team, and we have a new product design team, and they're working on different channels, basically. And so they're organized by the part of the business they support, and then we're organized by the function, right? So we have researchers and writers and designers and prototypers and operations people, and so we're sort of organized around those two principles. And the functions feed into the work streams. We sit within the product design organization, so I report into the SVP of product, but we serve a pretty broad set of the company outside of product as well.
Okay. When you're the only designer in a business, there are people, by the way, listening to this that are in a startup or even in a large company where they're a team of two.
Yeah.
How do you explain the value of design to the non-designers in the company?
Drinks? That's a great question. I find that, and it depends on what kind of design you're talking about. Are you talking about design thinking, or design with a capital D, or the activity of making product? That's a hard one. If you're at that level where people are like, well, I have an engineer friend who can just make the design. If you're at that level, then that's a hard one. I think what I've found is explaining it to the people is the hardest thing to do, and just doing it is the best thing. Like, we're going to do a workshop tomorrow, a design thinking workshop, and we're going to spend 30 seconds talking about what design thinking is, and then just get into a workshop.
Nice.
And spend 2 hours with a bunch of like C-level folks. With they're gonna be sitting there with aluminum foil and pipe cleaners and all this kind of fun stuff. And to me, that is the best way, is to do it in practice and to make them part of the process, as opposed to trying to articulate in some well-constructed, theoretical dissertation about the value of design. I think just get into it, show them the value of it.
Another question we have is, how do designers at eBay measure and present their results? This is coming from a place of, design for whatever reason being seen as subjective, and it's not tangible. Like, I'm just putting it out there and like hoping for the best.
Yeah, Well, so it's part of it is being, you know, sort of data driven, and you know, there's some metrics out there that are sort of tried and true. Like there's the A/B test, there's the you know, the sort of before and after tests, there's the qualitative feedback, there's survey feedback. There's all of these things and then there's like NPS, you know, Net Promoter Score, all those things that I think are not necessarily design oriented, but they're tools that designers can use to help articulate the success or failure of any particular decision. The harder part is measuring the more fungible, the more intangible components of what a great user experience is, right? Like, how do you measure delight?
Right.
How do you even define delight? Like, truly, what is the definition of customer delight? And so these are the things that, like, I don't know how many organizations or how many folks have actually solved that problem. I'm hoping that somebody on one of the other podcasts can basically say, here is all of the
magic bullet.
Yeah, here's the silver bullet. We spend a lot of time working on that. It's one of our biggest initiatives as a design organization this year, is figuring out a way to define and measure customer delight. And happy to report back once we get it all. Yeah. But it's hard. It's really hard. Yeah.
So we'll finish with this last question. As the function of design continues to evolve, what are the roles and methodologies that you think will emerge in the next 5 years?
Yeah. Well, I can speak. You know, I don't see the future, but I can tell you just some of the things that we're seeing in my new product development team, where we're designing. The buzzword is conversational commerce, which is basically commerce in chat, in WeChat, Messenger, Skype, wherever. And for us, I guess there's a couple things that are really interesting about it. One, it's based around artificial intelligence, so designing for systems that will change over time based on user input dynamically. That's not a terribly new thing, but it's a thing that I think is really interesting in that space because the main interface is conversation. Yeah. So that's one, I think, just the other part of that around conversational commerce is the main thing you're designing is conversation. And we launched a product that's inside of Facebook Messenger. It's called ShopBot. And you know, we spent a bunch of time trying to work out how we can manipulate conversation to overcome some of the challenges with the interface. Yeah. And so I think what you'll see is the skill sets that designers have, especially as things go, as interfaces become more ambient, either voice or text or something besides the traditional interface, that the skill sets that a designer will require to have are far beyond than what we understand right now. Whether it's, you know, being a great writer or being a philosopher. Like one of the things we're designing the identity of this bot. And so we have lots of philosophical conversations about not like the brand personality, but like what is the personality of this thing? Yeah. Is it human? Does it know it's a robot? If so, does it understand it's kind of a big deal right now? Like, you know, like, and so you find yourself like stretching outside of your traditional boundaries of what being a designer does. And I think as more of these kinds of ambient experiences come to life, the more and more ambient experiences and artificial intelligent experiences come to life, you're going to find yourself in this place where you're making other things. You're making decisions, design decisions, so that other things can make decisions later. And that is, you know, traditionally something that, you know, computer scientists did, and I think that that's going to happen more and more for designers. I hope I'm retired by then. Just kidding.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, you made it to the end. Congratulations. Thanks for watching the episode. I really, really hope you liked it. If you did like it, please leave us a review on the iTunes store. And by the way, if you have any questions that came up because of the content that we covered with our guests, go on YouTube, go on Twitter. You can tweet us, you can leave us a comment. We'll get back to you. We'll help you as much as possible. At HighRes Podcast. That's the screen name or the handle for Twitter, for Instagram, for Facebook. Find us, talk to us. We want to converse with you. We're not going to leave here, by the way, without also thanking our friends at Searle Video. They've been an amazing partner on this entire project. So Searle Video is a creative studio based out of Portland, Oregon. They've helped creative communities tell stories for over 10 years. They've done advertisements, behind the scene footage, and documentaries for companies like Google, Slack, XOXO Festival, Adobe, Intel. They're incredible. They've traveled with us through the entire country documenting these stories with our guests. That's incredible. Thank you so much, Searle. Listen, if you're a startup looking to elevate your product, if you're a big company looking to humanize your brand, if you're someone in the creative community who just wants to tell a story, you've got to check out the team at Searle Video. It's searlevideo.com, S-E-A-R-L-E video.com. Check out our friends at Searle. Thank you so much, guys. You guys have been incredible on this project.